When you see or hear the term conservation, what are some of the things that come to mind?
Trees,
Hippies,
recycling and composting.
using one square of toilet paper.
Different people have different understandings of what conservation entails, what it means, and what it encompasses.
Conservation often isn't taken very seriously. It's seen as a secondary concern, something that should be lower on people's lists of priorities. The thing is, this affects people too.
One thing to understand is that conservation didn't just come out of the blue. Some key figures in the history of conservation are people like John Muir and Gifford Pinchot. These two men were friends at the outset. They both cared about the environment, but it soon became clear that the perspectives they brought to the table were different in significant ways. Their friendship met a formal end in an argument about sheep on mountains. And so, as you can see from this example, it's clear that not everybody has the same definition of wilderness and what to do with it.
As the United States moved forward, we started to realize that our world is limited in its resources. With the disappearance of the frontier, as outlined poignantly by Frederick Jackson Turner at the end of the 19th century, wilderness became all the more precious.
The way we think about conservation is informed by our context. The resources that we use, the experiences that we've had in our specific cultural, geographical, and historical contexts, these all inform our values for the world today and also the ways we see and choose to proceed with conservation.
This idea is very applicable to resources, which are closely tied to wilderness and conservation. Let's take a look at the U.S.'s resources. We have the largest coal reserves in the world. We are the biggest producers and consumers of electricity in the world. We have a lot of forests, fresh water, timber, and other natural resources. And because we're a heavily industrialized nation, we use a lot of resources as well. The resources that we use are not all our own, though. While we do have a wealth of resources, we also import a good deal of them. We are dependent on other countries and regions, and these dependencies that each country has forms a network connecting the world.
China, for instance, is one of the U.S.'s main trading partners. As it's been growing economically, it's also neglected to consider conservation and the environment from which it extracts its resources from. And these resources include things like cotton, rice, corn, and wheat. And as it is the top producers of many of these resources, it is also the top producer of CO2 and greenhouse gases. There are also many issues with water pollution and water shortages that have affected many of the people in the area, and about 40% of the rivers are polluted by industry and agriculture. There is a lot of talk also about air pollution due to the rapid industrialization as well when the 2000 Olympics in Beijing rolled around. And funny enough, the giant panda has been one of the primary reasons China has looked towards preserving the environment. It's become the main rallying point for China and is perhaps more influential even than the effects that other issues have had on humans. Another country that we have looked into as a case study is Saudi Arabia. And Saudi Arabia is mainly desert. And as the population has grown, there has been a lot of effects on the surrounding areas, like urban heat islands. In addition, Saudi Arabia is an oil-based economy because it is the largest oil producer in the world, which brings in complications with all the other countries that need oil, like the United States. With oil as its primary resource, managing it and exporting it has become more of an issue, with oil spills occurring off the coast. And this affects other industries like the shrimp and fish industries, and also all the marine life around the area.
Another country that we looked at is the Congo in West Central Africa, where we see a different set of concerns. Instead of vast deserts, in a completely different biome is made of a lot of tropical equatorial forest, which is home to a lot of biodiversity. One of its key resources is its minerals: diamonds, gold, tin, copper, and coltan, which is used in a lot of common electronics like cell phones and computers. A lot of mining has been done in the past several decades, which has had many negative impacts on the environment, such as various chemical releases from the mining processes, soil erosion, water pollution, and deforestation. Poaching is also a serious concern, while urbanization and increases in the urban population are also putting a strain on the environment. Our interactions with other countries affect other societies, and the consequences of that come back and affect us as well. Social science, government, business, health, all of these issues come together and complicate the global network. And this is only the tip of the iceberg. The connections are vast, and some of them are unexpected or unlooked for, and so we miss some understanding of the way that our world is connected in all of these different ways. These connections are not just some abstract concept, though. They are seen in the data that scientists have gathered. One instance of this can be seen in the distribution of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. The highest concentrations are over land in the northern hemisphere, which emphasizes the human sources of it. We see a lot of it over North America and Western Europe, as well as in China and Russia. Atmospheric circulation carries the carbon dioxide to the southern hemisphere, though, whose carbon dioxide concentrations are lower, but rising. Whether you think that current levels of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere are problematic or not, it is undeniable that our actions have far-reaching consequences, and it's important to remember that.
Is this a lot to take in? Well, yes. The questions that come to mind are, what should I do and what can I do? And it's important, actually, that you start asking these kinds of questions because the world that we're talking about is one that you'll most likely be living in for the next many decades. So the first step you've already taken is to listen to this and see this video to become more aware of the ways that you're connected and the ways that your decisions play into something larger. And these decisions are everyday decisions like choosing, where you live, and consequently how that house is built, where you walk, where you vacation. All these things are connected to other choices and other things in the world. And so what we've concluded is that you do have choices. You have power and knowledge, and many of this has stemmed from heavy influences that we have that are primarily negative impacts on the earth from what we've mentioned earlier, but that we also have choices to make more positive ones. So science is not just science for science sake, or conservation for that matter. There are many different components to it, as we've seen, resources, the different concepts of wilderness, ideas of preservation and conservation, and how people have different views of the environment based on these specific experiences from where they're located. And because of all the differences and the complexities of all this, we don't actually need to be overwhelmed by it, but we can actually rather use this to our advantage. If we continue this conversation about conservation between different parties, we can share these ideas to produce more effective action. So the conservation conversation starts with you and your choice to continue that conversation.